What's up, explorers? Welcome back to our channel. We're the Choose here from Choose to Explore, where we teach you guys how to see the world
and save $1.
So we just came back from an amazing trip in none other than Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
And this was actually one of my favorite trips we've taken this whole year, so I'm so excited to tell you everything you need to know before you go to Rio.
Stay tuned, you don't want to miss this one.
So the first thing that you should know is that Brazil is the largest country in South America.
And not just that, it's actually the 5th biggest country in the entire world, and also the 5th most populous country in the entire world.
And it's so big that it actually has 4 different time zones.
And if you actually ever looked at a map of South America, you'd realize that Brazil really takes up about half the size of the whole continent. So if you're like us and you come from the Northern Hemisphere, well, coming to South America, and especially Brazil, seasons are going to be flip-flop. So our winters are going to be their summers, and our summers are going to be their winters.
So this might be a no-brainer for many people. However, there are some people who may not know that, so I want to make sure you're prepared too.
So actually, majority of the country of Brazil is going to be a tropical climate. So their winters may not really be like a New York winter, but they do experience different seasons. Typically, they refer to them as wet season and dry season.
And the wet season is December to April in Rio.
But the best season, and the season you need to know about in Brazil, is going to be Carnival season. Now, this is the biggest party and the biggest carnival in the whole world. Over 2 million people come every year in order to celebrate here in Brazil.
Now, the dates vary from year to year, but it's usually around the end of February through March. So the next thing you should know is all about visas.
So for this part, I'm only going to speak about the process for U.S. citizens because that is our experience. But I'd recommend looking at your individual country's website in order to figure out the exact process in order to enter Brazil.
And be prepared with that information before you go to Brazil.
To begin 2024, the Brazilian government reinstated the visa process in order for Americans to enter Brazil. But then it was pushed back to March of 2024. But we actually visited in March of 2024, and maybe 2 to 3 days before we actually arrived, they pushed it back to next year, being 2025. So if you're watching this video in 2024, as a US citizen, you do not need a visa in order to enter Brazil.
So the visa is currently postponed until April 2025, and it will cost about $81.
But the good thing about that $81 purchase for the visa is that visa will be good for 10 years. So you better make the most of that opportunity and explore Brazil.
And you can get more details about this visa at the usembassy.gov, and we also have the link included in the description for where you apply for this visa. Now let's get into the language of Brazil. So, they speak Portuguese.
And this is actually the only country in South America with the official language of Portuguese.
So we don't speak any Portuguese at all.
Wait, speak for yourself.
Bom dia.
Bom dia. That means hello or good day. I know that.
When did you learn that?
In Brazil.
Okay, so we really functioned with our Translate app. That was pretty much our top resource for getting around Brazil.
So being that Rio is a huge city with a lot of different people from around the world, it was definitely difficult for us to communicate with others with strictly English. So I'm about conversational level in terms of my Spanish, and I thought that that amount of Spanish would be able to help me at least a little bit in Brazil. But no, sir, it did not. It actually might have confused me even more. The Brazilian pronunciation really blows my mind. I probably could pick up maybe 4 or 5% of what is said to me. But I would say my conversational level in Spanish, especially my reading level, really helped me when I'm actually reading signs. Because there's a lot of cognates between the Spanish and the Portuguese. It's just the pronunciation that messes up my head.
It just doesn't sound quite the same.
So let's get real about the money in Brazil. In Brazil, they use the real, which is right here. So one tip that has really helped me in order to get foreign currency when I travel is my Charles Schwab debit card. And this allows me to take money out of the ATM, pay no foreign transaction fee, and pay no ATM fees as well. Definitely a game changer for myself. So my next point is something that really surprised me, and that's about cash versus credit in Brazil. So especially going through Latin America, I'm used to using my credit card, but in Brazil, it was on another level. So I'm used to major businesses taking credit card, such as malls, restaurants, plazas, things like that. But I was really surprised. Even the small mom and pop restaurants and vendors all took credit card as well. So to begin this trip, I took out 700 reals, and I was expecting to use all of this throughout my trip. But cards were so widely accepted that I was using my cards everywhere, I ended up having to buy little trinkets and souvenirs and even put a lot of money on my wall because I had so much left over at the end of the trip. So Liv and I were on the beach, and even the small little acai vendors who hand scooped the acai into the cups accepted cards. I'm talking about the people who sell towels on the street accepted cards. We were on a rock, and there were men walking around with drinks in their hand trying to sell the drinks. And they even accepted the cards. So basically, if you have a card with no foreign transaction fees, you'll be golden in Rio de Janeiro. To tip or not to tip in Brazil? That is a good question. So in the United States, we're used to tipping 20-25% on anything. But in Brazil, a lot of times the tip is already included in the check. And that's usually between 5 and 10%. And you'll see it on the bottom of the bill. It's like Servico or Servicio. I apologize. I told you Brazilian pronunciation is not my forte. And it's also not on everything like it is in America. Now, if you have an amazing experience and you want to tip on top of it, you can do that as well. But it is by no means expected. So now the next point is one of my favorite things about Rio, and that is how affordable it is.
So everything is affordable in Rio.
The most expensive part of this trip is actually going to be that flight from wherever you're coming from to Brazil. So we caught a really good flight deal from JFK to Rio, and we never looked back.
So we actually have a free resource for you about our top 9 ways to find cheap flights, which is linked in the description below. So you can find a cheap flight too.
And I was really surprised at how inexpensive it is. Our accommodation was under $40 a night, and it was beautiful beachfront. Majority of our meals were under $15 for the two of us. There were so many free attractions, and especially the beach is free as well. And we'll get into transportation a little bit later, but it is super affordable as well.
So next up, we're going to go over the diversity in Brazil.
One of my favorite things about Rio that I loved was the diversity of the city. So Rio actually has the largest population of black people outside of Africa in the entire world. I love going to places and I don't stand out. And Brazil is a place for almost anybody for that reason. And this is because there are so many different shades and colors of people in Rio. And we were walking around and people just assumed that we were also Brazilian. They were coming over and talking to us in Portuguese. And we just had to say, I'm sorry, I don't speak Portuguese. But it feels really good to fit in with the people.
And now we're going to go into the diversity of food and cuisine as well. There's so many options.
Because of Brazil's diversity, there's a lot of outside influence in that cuisine as well. One of my favorite things to eat are the little cheese balls. They're the pão de queijo.
Yes.
I actually first tried these because I saw them on Shark Tank, and I had to try them at Trader Joe's, and it was so good to actually be in Brazil and eat them because, trust me, they're a lot better here. Also, Brazil is really world-renowned for their steakhouses. Especially in the United States, I always go to Fogo de Chao. So it was good to try an actual Brazilian steakhouse, and the meat is amazing.
Another really great option is the acai bowls. So they're super fresh and so delicious. And the acai bowls were amazing.
What was amazing for me is in the US, acai bowls are like $12, $15. But in Brazil, you get a cup of acai for like $1, $2. If you want a real elaborate acai bowl, you can maybe get it for like $7, $8. But it's nowhere near the price as it is in the US, and it's a lot fresher, a lot better. You definitely taste the difference. Now, acai is not the only superfruit in Brazil. There are others. And Liv actually got a brand new favorite fruit and food item in Brazil that she loves. You guys know when Liv tries something and she likes it, she doesn't try anything else. So what was that, Liv?
The cupuaçu.
Listen, Liv got cupuaçu, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all day in Brazil.
Yes, I did. I'll do it again.
She's so disappointed because now in the US she can't find it anywhere. So she says she has to go back to Brazil just for the cupuaçu.
So the national drink of Brazil is the Caipirinha, and it's really good. So it has lime, sugar, ice, and
Cachaça.
Cachaça, yes. It was really good. You can get them anywhere, actually. So the next thing that you should know is that the people in Brazil are super health conscious.
One thing that really surprised me is the outdoor gym equipment that is all over Rio de Janeiro, especially on the beaches. There are pull-up bars, dip bars. People were outside playing volleyball, running. Everybody in Brazil, honestly, looks amazing. They really take care of themselves. And even the older people, they still are on the beach and they're active and they're playing, diving on the floor. They're doing everything just like the younger people.
So our next point is that Rio actually has one of the new 7 wonders of the world, and that's Christ the Redeemer.
So Christ the Redeemer is the largest Jesus statue in the world. It's set atop of one of the hills or mountains in Rio, and you can see it from many different vantage points throughout the city. One morning, Liv and I woke up before sunrise to see the beautiful sunrise views at Dona Marta. It was completely pitch dark when we got there, and we were one of the first people there, but I was really surprised when I looked over my shoulder and I saw this big Jesus statue like this glowing in the darkness. Liv thought she was going to heaven and Jesus was coming to take her back.
I mean, it was really great views up there. So I actually have an entire blog post on the Dona Marta experience, and you can check that out at choose64.com.
And this actually ties into our next point, which is the views of Rio de Janeiro. So we've been to so many different countries and cities around the world, and in our opinion, the sunrises and sunsets in Rio are unlike anywhere else in the world. And that's definitely a testament to the beautiful landscapes, the different vantage points, the beautiful beaches, the mountains, and definitely the spectacular views here.
So don't sleep in, definitely check out the sunrises as well as the sunsets. So our next point is all about transportation in Rio.
So typically when Liv and I travel, we usually take public transportation. But one thing that I did realize in Rio is just how affordable Ubers are. From the airport to our Airbnb during peak time was about an hour away. And in New York, that would probably be close to $200, $250. It was around $20 for that trip. I honestly could not believe it. And a lot of the little rides are going to be $2, $3. If you go really far, it might be $5. And the Ubers can be safer and more private than the public transportation. It's like 50 cents on a public transportation versus $1.50 on an Uber. So one thing to note is that the Ubers don't actually pick you up at the gate at the airport. You actually have to walk a little bit. There's a whole section dedicated just to Ubers for pickups.
Now next up, we're going over famous beaches in Rio.
So Rio is world renowned for having some of the best beaches in the world. Our accommodation was right across the street from LeBlanc Beach, which is more of a low-key beach, which we loved.
But if you keep walking further, you'll end up at Ipanema Beach, and even further is Copacabana Beach.
To be honest with you guys, I was underwhelmed by these beaches. It was definitely lively, like an amazing vibe, but the beach itself, I'm talking about the sand and the water, was not my favorite.
It was almost similar to the beaches in New York from our experience.
Well, it was definitely warmer than the beaches in New York.
Yeah.
But we're just basing this off of the sand, the color of the water, and the visibility. But if we're talking about vibes alone, Ipanema and Copacabana are top tier beaches.
So we had a very limited time in Rio, and we didn't quite make it to every place on our bucket list.
But about 2 hours outside of Rio, there's a place called Arraial de Cabo, which I hear is one of the most beautiful beaches in all of Brazil.
So it's supposed to have really clear blue water with super soft white sand.
So on our next trip back to Rio, we're definitely going to go and visit. One thing that I do want to note about the beaches in Rio are a lot of people tend to rent the beach chairs and the umbrellas. And I usually don't even consider this as an option because they're usually super expensive. But in Rio, it was a lot more affordable than what we're used to in the Caribbean. But I will also note that when you go to the beach, please don't bring any valuables with you, especially if you do plan to go into the water.
So with so many crowds at the beach, it may be difficult to keep your eye on your stuff. So just don't bring it.
So our next point is going to be about the favelas in Rio. And they're usually going to be large urban neighborhoods with really dense populations. From far away, a lot of these favelas look beautiful because they're usually built up into the mountains and super colorful. But I do not recommend, especially if you don't speak Portuguese and you are not from there, to just walk through the favelas, especially not alone. These are usually going to be poor areas, so there could be higher levels of crime as well. Now, if you're bent on going and seeing some of these favelas, there are favela tours that you can go and do.
But I would read the reviews on the tour just to make sure that it is the experience that you are looking to have.
Another thing that surprised me in Rio is just how affectionate Brazilians are, especially in public. So a lot of Brazilians greet each other with kisses. And couples were really affectionate as well. I'm talking about hugging, kissing, body grabbing, and this really was all types of relationships. This is definitely a place where the LGBTQ plus community was widely embraced and accepted.
So next up, we're going to go over a travel essential that you really do need. So that would be a travel adapter. So they use different outlets there. It's similar to the European outlets, but they may have different voltage. So definitely bring your universal travel adapter.
And you can find the one that we use linked in the description on our Amazon checklist below. Liv and I do a lot of research before we go anywhere. And one thing that really stood out about Rio is a lot of people had concerns of safety.
So during our time in Rio, we had no incidents where we felt unsafe.
Now this is not to say that Rio cannot be unsafe. Now maybe this could be that Liv and I didn't really stand out as tourists in Brazil. We took Ubers as our primary forms of transportation.
We stayed around where other people were, so we weren't really alone in any instance.
And we took the advice of many other locals while we were traveling about areas to visit and places to see. Now this is not to say that things still cannot happen at any moment, and that is why we travel with Safety Wing Travel Medical Insurance. Now I love Safety Wing because it covers a wide array of different things, such as disturbed flights, missed flights, missing baggage, or medical expenses that could pop up as well on your trip. My favorite thing about Safety Wing is just how affordable it is. If you're under 35 years of age and you're traveling outside of the country, it's a couple dollars a day to cover you for the entire trip. And there you guys have it, our top tips to know before you go to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Did any of these surprise you? Let us know in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for checking out our channel. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.